how's this work in my house? And I always, the first question is, well, what do you want to do? As to Scott's point, he got into solar because he wanted to power his sump pump, right? So the first thing is to be realistic about what the value proposition of batteries is. And batteries have what are called stacked benefits. There's not just resiliency, there's grid services, which he spoke about. There is arbitrage, which we will speak about. But for a homeowner, and to a lesser extent business owner, the single value proposition for batteries is backup power. And essentially, they are similar to a generator. And some people might check me on this, but dollar for dollar right now, the gas generator is probably as cost effective or a little bit more effective than batteries. Now that's going to change, but the value proposition is similar. Of course, your batteries aren't, don't have moving parts, don't have fuel, run a little bit more cleanly, so there is that.
Less noise?
Yeah, less noise, that's correct. Yeah, and the joke is when does a generator break? When you use it, right? So, but that's really what the value proposition is for battery backup in Virginia. Other applications which Scott talked on or spoke of that are kind of future are what we call grid services, peak demand, or reduction of grid support. Businesses actually get charged, as Scott alluded to, for their 30-minute peak draw of energy. So if they got all their machinery running for 30 minutes, one day a year or one day a month, they get that peak demand bill charge. It's called the demand charge. So value proposition for battery storage is peak demand, demand charge reduction, and in some cases, if you have standby charges for a system over 10 kilowatts, that could work. The other thing that was alluded to was time of use or arbitrage. So in places where you have a different rate per unit of electricity or per kilowatt hour, and California is a good example, you might pay 22 cents a kilowatt hour for that August afternoon when they're having that peak demand, and then off-peak you might pay much cheaper. So this is called arbitrage. We do not have this in Virginia yet. We have a flat price for the most part for kilowatt hour per unit of electricity. That value proposition for battery storage isn't quite there yet. Now that's not to say that it might be not be there in the future, because at least in some of the discussions, utilities might be open to time of use or variable rates. But those are your other applications of storage, and of course on the bigger scale, storage can act like a big power plant, right, helping out the grid. But really, what you're thinking of with storage, or just a few considerations, is with your home or business, how does storage work? Remember, there are two different types of solar systems. So I often hear people say, I want to go off grid. And there is confusion about what that means. Most people think off grid is actually what is net zero, producing all their energy. But a true off grid system has no connection to the electric grid. Think of a remote hunting cabin or a place that's so rural that it costs more to run the power lines, so it has no grid connection. Most of what we're going to be working with or discussing today is an on-grid system. So these are net metered, grid-tied systems that have that two-way, and then essentially the battery backup acts as a topped-off energy supply, acts like a generator, and they kick on automatically. As many people are surprised to know that if you have a pure grid-tied system, what happens when the grid goes down?
You go down.
You go down with your solar. It's a safety issue, and it also, as Scott mentioned, the grid conditions the power of the solar, so you need that grid. But what battery storage does is it allows islanding. If you think about it, you're a little island in the middle of that grid outage, and you're able to produce your power with solar and then store it in batteries. So what can batteries power? And this is kind of the question of, well, what do I want to do with batteries? As a homeowner, you have to think of what the value proposition, what they offer. So the value proposition is seamless backup power. So when that grid goes down, it is literally milliseconds. It flips an automatic switch. And then what you have are your critical loads sub-panel. So loads in the terminology are just things that consume electricity. Anything that you plug in that uses that electricity, could be your EV, could be your refrigerator or computer. Now, critical loads, or a critical load sub-panel or circuit, are loads that are vital to functioning. Whether they are sump pump, water, medical equipment, beer refrigerator, whatever you think is vital to your functioning, those are essential loads. And as was mentioned earlier, most people that go solar with battery storage as a backup, you are not going to power your whole home. It just doesn't make sense. I like to use the analogy of water, right? Your battery backup power is kind of like those big jugs of water. And so your critical loads are going to be drinking, maybe bathing, right? You're not going to go out and hose down your driveway with your backup water. So think of your critical loads or what are necessary. And then, again, the question is what am I going to need? And I always have to give a politician's answer when it comes to that with solar and with battery storage, because I don't know what you want to do. I don't know how many critical loads you want to power, whether it's a well pump or whether it's just a few lightings, areas of lighting. So two things are generally big considerations or the major considerations when you're sizing battery storage. And that's power and energy. And this is probably probably the hardest concept to explain. It's where there's a lot of confusion because those terms are used interchangeably. But you can think of power as instantaneous wattage. So the first thing that some installer is going to ask is, well, during an outage, what do you want to power at any given moment? And that's where power comes in. And think of it as a system designed to power maybe 100-watt lights or a couple small circuits of critical machinery is going to be different than powering a 2,000 volt or 2,000 watt HVAC system. You're going to have two different types, and that's where power comes in. It's your instantaneous, what you're powering at any given moment. Also, there's this thing called surge power too. So something, electric motors that are rated at 2,000 watts, when they come on, they're actually drawing more than that 2,000 watts because they have a surge power or startup power. So these are all the considerations that your installer is going to be looking for. And when I started, I used to have to do these charts of, well, okay, what's the wattage, what's the surge power, how long are you using it for? I think there's probably electronic things that make it easier now. So that's your power, any given moment. And then your energy is the quantity of power used or available over time. So that's your second consideration. And that's measured in kilowatt hours, right? And energy is always flowing in a circle like a circuit, so you have to use that time element. It can't be measured volumetrically, right? So that's where the hour comes in. And it's the amount available, again, over time. It's kind of like the size of your water, your backup water jug. And with energy, you're also thinking about, well, do you need to run your critical loads for 15 minutes or an hour or 24 hours? So that's where your energy comes. It's energy use over time. So power instantaneous and then energy instantly or over time. I like to think of these two common examples. I like the water. Energy is the size of that big backup of water. Your battery storage, again, is like a big backup well or big backup barrel of water and how big it is. So the higher your backup is in kilowatt hours, the bigger barrel of water you're going to have. And then the power is the size of the hose, right? Remember, you're going to need a bigger hose to power that 2,000 watt air conditioning than compared to the 50 watt or 100 watt light bulbs, right? So again, those are just basic terminologies. The good news is when you go through battery storage with an installer, they should be able to walk you through this. But our goal also with solar is that as a consumer, we want you to be prepared so that you know what you're talking about when you talk to your installer. So these are probably some of the terminologies that we'll use. Here's just a real quick battery backup. This is a fictional account, but the Johnsons lose power several times a year, each time the power is out for a day. So they're going to size their battery storage appropriately. In some commercial applications, it may be a data center that only needs 10 or 15 minutes of backup power to cool their computers before generator kicks on. So it is highly customizable. But your power might be a 5,000 watt battery to power those instantaneous loads, and then a 6 kilowatt hour battery for the energy. Fully recharged by solar, so what happens is in that system, it just runs like a regular net metered system, and then once that grid goes out, it flips a switch, and that solar gun then feeds into the batteries, which then feed your critical loads, so you're not powering your whole home. And in this case, their critical loads might be a refrigerator, a small microwave, some lights, cable modem. And what they choose not to power is a stove, electric dryer, electric water heater. Those require a lot of power, so it's going to really be a robust system in order to be sized for that. Storage pricing, again, we're going through a lot of information really quickly, so two things. Both of these presentations will be online after and available, and you can take Scott's classes, right?
Of course.
Master classes, mine as well. But how is storage priced? So you want to think of what you're looking at as far as hardware, and your batteries might be priced per kilowatt hours, typical, or per kilowatt. Your charge controller, it's a little bit more robust of a system compared to just a simple net metered system. So you have a charge controller would essentially kind of